was shocked that people didn't realize that an egg-laying hen was in a cage about the size of this piece of paper. Pigs are in a cage that's 7 feet by 2 feet. It's like a human being stuck in an airplane seat for years upon years.
People assume we have laws to protect animals, right? Number one. And two, that we have laws that regulate industry in an appropriate way. And number three, so the industries have tried to make sure this information doesn't come out. Regulations that people assume are in place to stop this kind of behavior aren't there, and they don't know that. We should all be able to agree that if we've decided to raise animals for food, they should at least have some decency in how we treat them. So Prop 12 was an extension of this idea. And they said any animal products sold in the state of California also have to meet this standard. There were some small producers in the state of California who said, actually, this is better because we're already doing it and it's hard for us to fight the big corporations. And so this gives us more of a level playing field. So it's good and we like it. And there were a couple of big producers like Hormel that said, yeah, we're gonna do this. This is fine. But there were a couple who said no, right? And so they decided to fight this. And they said, you can't tell us in Iowa or North Dakota or whatever, when we're producing animals there for food, what we can do. And California basically said, well, we're not telling you what to do. We're just telling you what to do if you want to sell stuff in our state. The Supreme Court said, the federal government has the right to regulate interstate commerce. And so if they haven't regulated, then the states get to do what they think is appropriate. It's also a case that took for granted, which is really important by the Supreme Court, that the interest of protecting animals was a sufficient and legitimate state interest.
So why hasn't the federal government regulated how animals are treated in our country?
So the starting point in the US and in every other country is that animals are property. You can do what you want with your legally owned property as long as there's no rule against it. That gives corporations a lot of power. So if you think about what we do to animals who are being raised for food, what we do to animals being used in entertainment, animals being used in the research industry, all that's legal.
Isn't it outrageous that wild animals have some standards of care, zoo animals has some standards of care, but the animals in our agriculture have nothing to protect them?
It's striking, and it's not by accident. We have anti-cruelty laws. The other area of law that we have that protects some animals is the Animal Welfare Act, which sounds like it should protect the welfare of all kinds of animals, right? Exempted from most of those statutes across the country are farmed animals, animals used in research, sometimes wild animals, sometimes not. It's sort of the corporatization, right, of the agriculture sector. It's a factory, and we treat them like they're interchangeable mechanistic parts. And so you have a system that's designed to push these animals to the extreme, right? The least amount of food, the least amount of space, the least amount of care, right? And when they get sick and die, okay, you're going to lose a certain percentage of them, and that's a given. And some will not only get sick, they'll sicken human beings, right, who are eating their products, all in the idea of it's efficient and it's economically beneficial. And then we've also decided to grow these animals as big as we possibly can, as quick as we possibly can. And these are animals who, if they weren't slaughtered when they are slaughtered, would no longer be able to stand.
I was so struck by the fact that it passed in California by the largest percentage in voter history of any ballot initiative, 63%. Thrilled when I found out that in the state of Massachusetts, it passed by 77%. And so people really on both sides of the fence, whether they're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, share the common value that this is really an outrage.
The goal, right, is to do these pieces of legislation sensibly so people have time, so we can move forward. And so it doesn't cost the industry a ton of money, and it doesn't cost consumers a ton of money. We've seen this now over 20 years where people have been trying to do these transitions, and the costs are never what the industry suggests they're going to be. And consumers are willing when there are increased costs, even if they're not valid costs. And this is something that we've seen the companies do. They'll say it's going to cost more. It doesn't cost them more. They still charge consumers more. And they say it's costing more to do this thing that we just did, even if it didn't.
Well, let's transition into the EATS Act. The EATS Act could potentially erode all these gains that we just made at the Supreme Court.
The idea is that states shouldn't be allowed to designate any restrictions The language is really, really broad and really frightening. So people around the country are pretty concerned that it won't affect just agricultural products, right? But all kinds of other environmental laws. The scary part is that if this gets appended to either the farm bill or the budget bill or some other must pass bill, then we're in trouble. I don't think it has any chance of passing on its own. But obviously there's a lot of moneyed interests trying to get this to move forward. So advocates are trying to move as quickly as they can, right? We are trying to teach law students as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and as many as we can. And the industry is trying as many options, additional litigation, the ESAC. So this is a battle that's fully engaged.